Now, the country's high levels of violence and abuse against children and the youth remain a challenge despite laws, policies and programs all geared towards curbing them. As the country commemorates Child Protection Week, a Randfontein family west of Johannesburg is seeking justice for their 18-year-old matric pupil who's allegedly been assaulted by her father a week ago. The victim's mother says the incident happened after she had sneaked out to go to a party without informing her father. The teenager, who sustained multiple bruises to her body, is now recuperating and has gone back to school on Monday. Her father was arrested and will be appearing at the Randburg Magistrates Court for bail application. But the teenager is opposing that in her court statement, alleging that he's aggressive and that she won't feel safe around him. To speak to us about Child Protection Week, we're joined now by Director of the Teddy Bear Foundation for Abused Children, Dr. Shaheda Omar. Dr. Omar, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, just as you and I are about to speak, we learn of a very disturbing incident, an 18-year-old abused by her father and saying that you won't feel safe around him. I mean, that in itself is quite heartbreaking. Talk to us. What is your reaction?
Indeed, I think, we always think that the danger is external and that children are faced with challenges outside the home. Unfortunately, we often fail to understand that children are at grave risk even within their home environment. The very people that are supposed to protect them and provide safety and security are often harming and inflicting grievous bodily harm on children. So I think this is something that needs to be factored in our daily awareness raising, conscientizing, and making children aware of their rights, their responsibilities, and the access and availability to resources and platforms where they can seek support and justice.
What would you say is the purpose of Child Protection Week? I mean, you speak now about ensuring that they have the access and the tools to seek justice.
Well, I think, we do not speak to Child Protection Week. We speak to child protection all the time. It's a 365-day campaign. All the interventions, all the outreach work and awareness raising is consistent. It's on an ongoing basis. But speaking to Child Protection Week, as has been spearheaded by the Department of Social Development, the whole objective is to, increase awareness and certainly bring to the attention of people the risks that children are facing, where children can get help. So it's a lot of awareness raising, making people aware of referral pathways, and that help is a phone call away, that help is at hand. I think that's the importance and understanding of Child Protection Week, just as a constant reminder to people out there, firstly, that abuse does occur, and when and if it does occur, what can be done and how can people be helped.
I suppose as we speak about this 18-year-old who's now taken her father to court, we know that a lot of the times in South Africa that could have been a matter swept under the carpet, because one could have argued that the father's a breadwinner and having him locked up in jail will compromise the family.
Indeed, yes, that the father, that could be one of the scenarios, and I think obviously that is something that we've often seen played out. But as you said, you alluded to the fact that in many cases where it's intrafamilial within the family context, there's no disclosure made, there's fear of reprisal, and children are often afraid to come forward and make a disclosure and open a case. So very unlikely for criminal cases to be opened in settings where it is occurring within the family context. However, we cannot condone this, we cannot justify this, regardless of whether it's a biological parent, a caregiver, a legal guardian. It's not justified, and certainly it is not promoting the best interests of the child. Subjecting children to trauma and secondary victimization, and of course it has long-term implications in the child's trajectory.
Where would you say, I mean, you've spoken a great deal about, what happens inside the home and how many of these cases often come from inside the home, but we do know that the some of the abuses do happen outside the home. What does that now reflect about the state of child safety in South Africa?
Well, as you've indicated that yes, children get abused within the home environment, but also even outside. And if we just look at some of the challenges faced by victims and their families, the reality is that there's not always appropriate, adequate responses or swift responses to when cases are actually reported. So law enforcement, and I think we need to also contextualize that, that with law enforcement officers, it's often not their fault. They are overwhelmed with high cases. They have a high volume of cases and, of course, under-resourced. So looking at not sufficient personnel, not adequate resources, not having vehicles at their disposal when they need to take a victim for a medical examination or need to transport a victim to a place of safety. These are some of the challenges that are faced. And then, of course, it's not every police officer may not be trained to deal with gender-based violence and violence of this nature. So their responses may not be appropriate because of the lack of adequate training and being equipped to manage this appropriately and swiftly.
And in such an instance, how can the victim then be empowered? Because that in itself would be discouraging. If you go to a police station and you find a police officer who's not really patient or willing to listen, and that in itself could really discourage one.
Well, certainly it is often a deterrent. That is what we find from many victims and their families seeking intervention and support and counseling. And that is something that they highlight, that they don't want to proceed with any criminal charges. They don't want to proceed with the criminal justice system because of the delays and, of course, the long drawn-out court processes, which certainly is, it prolongs the trauma and, of course, reopens the wounds repeatedly. So how can that be managed? I think, firstly, it's also addressing empowering people, the importance of it, that despite the challenges, it's holding people accountable, escalating the matter. So if one doesn't get sufficient help at desk level, one needs to escalate it to the next level, whether it's shift commander, station commander, cluster commander. But that is something that we do regularly, and we empower the victims and their families to pursue that process. But not to remain silent and immobilized and trapped in the situation.
With Child Protection Week in full swing, Dr. Omar, the Department of Social Development has now encouraged South Africans to seek alternative care for their children if they themselves are unable to care for them. We're learning that between April of 2010 and March of 2024, the department has recorded over 16,000 national adoptions, which is adoption within South Africa. What considerations need to be made before such a decision is now exercised by a family or parent who may feel that they're unable to take care of their child?
Well, I think, the Children's Act speaks very clearly to children in need of care, children at risk, and also looking at the best interests of the child, but also the underlying ethos is preservation of the family. So before there's any form or kind of disintegration, one would look at interventions like providing reconstructive services where both the parents or the parent that is not willing to keep the child in his or her care, receive some kind of supportive counseling, explore all possible options, so receive support and enable them to make that informed decision, but also to provide support and therapy to the child and look at the possibility of preservation where there can be reunification. But if that is not possible, obviously then different processes will have to be pursued where one looks at alternative care, but even in the case of alternative care, looking at what is in the best interest of the child.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on this discussion. We'll leave it there for now with Teddy Bear Foundation for Abused Children, Director of that foundation, Dr. Shaheda Omar.